Welcome back up to the Vinyl Attic. We're going to do something a little different this week. We're taking a break from the 100 albums that should be in your collection because I can't find my Janet Jackson album. Rhythm Nation is somewhere. I think I got misfiled. As any record collector will tell you, when everything goes in its right place, and when a record goes in its wrong place and you can't find it, you immediately go to eBay. So I want to do something I've been wanting to do for a bit, which is talk about various artist albums. Not soundtracks, but various artist compilation albums. For a lot of us who grew up, especially in the 70s, this was often the way to discover music. The K-Tel collection. I mean, now a lot of you are now I call that music generation, volume 175. I first kind of started playing records on my mom's jazz records and my dad's K-Tel records. And this was my favorite of his that I've put behind glass because it's so esteemed to me. My dad's K-Tel 25 Rock Revival Greats. It has Chuck Berry and the Everly Brothers and all your old favorites on it. I played this over and over again. Rockin' Robin. I knew when Michael Jackson did Rockin' Robin that Bobby Day did the original because I had it on my dad's K-Tel. So I wanted to go through every collection. Usually has a section at the end where you put your various artists. You know, where do you file the various artists? What letter do they go under? They go at the very end. Any record store, you go through everything, and at the end it's the various artist stuff. So I wanted to take you through my 10 favorite, at least as of today, my 10 favorite various artist albums in my collection. Some you might know, and some I bet you don't know. All right, let's start at number 10. Is an album that came out, it was put out by BBC in 1988. Called Sgt Pepper Knew My Father. There's a lot of Beatles, various artists in my collection and in the world. This one was released as a benefit record on the 21st anniversary of the original Sgt Pepper's album that came out in 1967. This one came out in 1988. And it's just super weird. And the highlights on it are Sonic Youth, as usual, doing Within You, Without You. Courtney Pine, who is like the John Coltrane of the 80s, doing When I'm 64. I forgot for a second which song he did. And Billy Bragg doing She's Leaving Home. Billy Bragg. It's a really weird, great, meant to be as weird as the original album. The Fall doing A Day in a Life is crazy, cray. I love that one. That's at number 10. At number 9, I love the tribute records. I love the tribute records to, artists paying tribute to somebody that's inspired them. This is a tribute to Kurt Weill, the great German composer. And it's all original music, including Marianne Faithfull and Sting doing Mac the Knife, and Todd Rundgren, and Charlie Hayden, Tom Waits, of course. You have to have Tom Waits and Kurt Weill. This is such a great, weird record. If you find it, it doesn't really fit into any category. I love this one because it's so weird. I think I've mentioned before that when I was in 18, I went to school in London, at University of London, and I loved record shopping, and there was just so much to buy that occasionally I would buy some of these compilations. This was one of my favorites from it's a K2 compilation called Modern Dance, and it was the new wavy music, so it really turned me on to Depeche Mode, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, Japan. Japan was one of my favorites on this one. Human League, Visage. I love this sort of weird early 80s dance music, and that one's a favorite. I kind of break that out occasionally when I'm feeling nostalgic. Late 80s, the Greenpeace Collection. This was an interesting story where in the Soviet Union, a lot of Western music was not available. It was just you could not get British or American artists into the Soviet Union. But for the benefit of Greenpeace, the environmental organization, they created a double album that has U2 and John Mellencamp and Simple Minds and REM and Bryan Adams and Peter Gabriel and Brian Ferry and all your favorites. And it was very popular in the Soviet Union, and then they made it available in the United States. This great double album called The Rainbow Warrior to raise money for Greenpeace. And people cared about the environment, and they still do, but this was a way to show your support by buying this album. And it's just sort of all the great. The World Party track is amazing on this. Thompson Twins, In Excess. Kind of all your late 80s greats are on this great compilation that came from the Soviet Union. Not too many albums that have that story. All right, the next one is really important to me, Music and Rhythm from 1982. This was released in advance of the WOMAD Festival in England, which was a world music festival meant to turn people on to the global joy of music from around the world. And besides having really great early 80s artists like XTC and The Beat, it has Balinese chanting music, Burundi drumming. It was put together by Peter Gabriel, who's also on this record. And I used this record so much for my students when I was teaching in the early 90s to talk about, like, you know, there are all these amazing cultures around the world that produce all this incredible music. And I'd often just be taking songs off of this album. It's such a journey around the world of music with some favorites. You know, Pete Townsend has a cool song on here, John Hassel. But there's also a lot of indigenous music from the developing world. If you want a good sort of primer on world music, find Music and Rhythm from 1982. All right, another tribute disc. Got to have a tribute to Brian Wilson in there. This one comes out in 1990, and it looks like the Smile album, because we didn't really have the Smile album yet. From the Beach Boys, but it has some of the coolest stuff. Again, Sonic Youth. Sonic Youth shows up on so many of these tribute discs because they just love the music that they love. So I think they were pretty easy to ask. Hey, we're doing a tribute record to, you know, Barney the Dinosaur. Do you want to record a song for it? They do. I Know There's an Answer. Nikki Sudden, an old friend of mine from way back when, is on here doing wonderful. A lot of bands you wouldn't know, but then some bands you might know, like the Records and Das Damen. A really great tribute to Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. Love that one. Okay, this next one was huge in my life. Another one from 1982, Burning Ambitions, The History of Punk. This double record was like the Bible for us in the 80s, because so many of these punk records, especially the English punk records, you couldn't get your hands on. You know, we didn't have streaming, we didn't have CDs. It was just so hard to get this music. And this put it all on here, all from like the obvious stuff like the Buzzcocks and the Dead Kennedys to Wire, the 101ers, which is the Joe Strummer's band before the Clash, are on here, Killing Joke, early Adam and the Ants, the Vice Squad, The Exploited. I mean, kind of like the hardcore stuff. If you could get your hands on this, and obviously here's another riff on Sgt. Peppers, this album cover. This was your punk Bible. This was all the stuff that you wanted. The Heartbreakers, the Saints, so, you know, not just English, American and Australian. Eater, Lurkers, Adverts, The Fall, The Ruts, Sham 69, UK Subs, Cockney Rejects, Killing Joke. I mean, it's just, this record, this is one of the ones I want to take with me when I go, because this is where I found all my punk rock. Burning Ambitions. Good God, this record is so great. All right, next one, another great tribute record is a tribute. This came out in 1990, I think. Tribute to Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly. All original music, and again, paying tribute to the people who inspired you. And this has originals from Bob Dylan, U2, John Mellencamp, Little Richard, Arlo Guthrie, surprise, surprise, Willie Nelson, Emmylou Harris, Sweet Honey in the Rock, Taj Mahal. I mean, this is just a great, for the Dylan track alone, for the Dylan and the U2 tracks alone, this one is a really great, and you get to learn about, if you don't know about Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly, it's sort of like a lesson. And this, you know, these were very popular in the 80s. Okay, this next one, we're at number 2 now. I don't know if you've been counting, but at number 2 was my first album. This record, it's in pieces, but it's number 1 hits of the 60s. It's a 4-record set. And the story of this album, I've had to sort of piece it together. The story of this album is, it was advertised on UHF TV in 1971, 1972 by Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees, who did these little skits. And we'll show you a little clip.
98. You'll hear Our Day Will Come by Ruby and the Romantics. Dion and the Belmonts. Happy Together. Summer in the City.
Summer in the City.
You've Lost That Love and Feeling. Hang on, Snoopy.
To everything.
But you get much, much more. You get...
And I'm sitting at home, and you could order it by calling the 1-800 number. And I was like, those songs are great. Those songs are great. And you could order it COD, which stood for cash on delivery. So I didn't know. I didn't have any money. I was 8 years old. So I called, ordered it. It showed up on the doorstep in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Knock on the door. My mom's like, "What is this?" And they're like, "You owe $6.99." My mom had to pay it. But I lived this record, all four sides, Crimson and Clover, Judy in Disguise. I mean, all these great number one hits, I were my religion. I mean, I just play as an 8-year-old, before I started buying albums on their own, this was my introduction into the great variety of music. And I got really, some of it bugged me a little bit. I mean, you had some great 60s things like the theme from Summer Place, but then you had American Woman, and a couple of records that came out in like 1971, and I'm like, those aren't 60s records, but it's a pretty good introduction to the great variety of the amazing music that hit number one in the 1960s. I love it. I'm holding on to it, even though I've had to kind of put it together because it's fallen apart over the years. All right, number one hits. Okay, now speaking of number ones, let's go to number one. My number one compilation album, and I got a whole section this big, just on compilation albums, but I had to pick my favorite one, the one that meant the most to me, the one that got the most play, and it's a record that came out in early 1978 called No Wave from A&M Records. So this was a sampler from a label, A&M, and this was at the very beginning, at least in America, of punk rock. We were discovering what this punk rock thing is, and of course, a guy with a skinny tie, he's on an ironing board, and the leopard pattern. But listen to the artists that are on this. And this was punk rock. This was punk rock in 1978. The Squeeze, who were called the UK Squeeze. The Police, Joe Jackson, Clark Kent, who was the drummer of the Police. The Secret, the Stranglers. Oh my gosh, the Stranglers doing Bring on the Nubiles. The Dickies, and each getting 2 tracks on this. I played the crap out of this. I saw it in a record store. At the mall, Record Bar of all places, and look at this, my first colored vinyl, I think. Really, really cool, and was my gateway drug to punk rock. Once I heard this record, I was like, I'm not going back to REO Speedwagon. This is where my heart lies. The Police doing Roxanne and Next to You, really great, really great. All right, those are just 10 albums that are a great example of the variety of stuff that you can get in various artist records. I'd love to know what your favorite various artist record. We're going to do soundtracks later. That's down the road a bit because we've got a whole other section of soundtracks over here. But just in terms of various artists or compilation albums, whether it's, now that's what I call music or some K-Tel record. If you've got a favorite, put it in the comments down below. I'd love to know. Maybe I'll track it down at the record store. Cool. All right, we'll be back, hopefully, with Janet Jackson very soon. This record matters. This record matters to me, damn it. This music matters. You matter. So let's talk about it.